Everybody. Welcome to Poetry Lockdown Day 38. Um, it's been a fun week of poems so far. One of the things that I am trying to do through this series of readings is draw some connection points, let poems talk to each other, so to speak. So if you have been tuning in, you know earlier in the week I read The Fish by Elizabeth Bishop. It's a terrific poem about this sort of survivor fish that manifests itself to the speaker in the poem. And I mentioned a term from Gerard, Manley, Hopkins called inscape. An inscape, I think I just quoted that definition really briefly, is, whatever it is that makes the thing itself, that's its inscape. So, like the leaders and the lines stuck in that huge monster fish's mouth, like really made it the survivor. But I thought, you know what, it's such a powerful term. I think it's such a helpful uh, reality, really, in poetry that I wanted to give you some of Hopkins' poetry from his own words, because I think he exemplifies the inscape beautifully. And one of my favorite poems. It's a classic. Plus, I teach at Chríst, a Jesuit school, and it wouldn't be a full poetry lockdown if we didn't have a Jesuit in the mix at some point. So I'm going to read you Hopkins' poem, and then I'm actually going to put Hopkins in conversation with a Jewish theologian I've been reading who's been blowing my mind lately, Abraham Joshua Heschel, the author of this great book, The Prophets. Totally recommend it. So if you, like me, like to mix theology and poetry together, I think you'll appreciate Rabbi Heschel. So let's start with the poem, though. Here we go. This is a famous one, as Kingfishers Catch Fire. As kingfishers catch fire, dragonflies draw flame. As tumbled over rim and roundy wells, stones ring. Like each tucked string tells, each hung bell's bow swung finds tongue to fling out broad its name. Each mortal thing does one thing and the same, deals out that being indoors each one dwells. Selves, goes itself. Myself it speaks and spells, crying, what I do is me, for that I came. I say more. The just man justices, keeps grace. That keeps all his goings graces. Acts in God's eye what in God's eye he is, Christ. For Christ plays in 10,000 places, lovely in limbs and lovely in eyes not his, to the Father through the features of men's faces. Now, many, many words have been said by much smarter people than me about this poem. So I want to zoom in on one particular line that I feel like illustrates that idea of the inscape and puts Hopkins' poem in conversation with Rabbi Heschel. So before I dive into Heschel's line, let me just introduce him if you don't know his work. So Rabbi Heschel was a Jewish theologian, wrote a lot about different figures in the scriptures, and was a professor in Germany right during the time, or actually, I think, no, I've got that wrong, in Poland, right at the time when Nazi Germany was invading Poland. And in fact, he escaped just before, like right at the outset of World War II, but some of his family members did not, and in fact died in the concentration camps. Then became a really prominent professor in the United States, and was actually a friend and collaborator of Martin Luther King Jr. and worked extensively with civil rights groups and protested the Vietnam War. So you can see justice is something that was very important to Rabbi Heschel and the prophets. So I'm going to read this one line that I feel like really speaks to the poem that I just read. Rabbi Heschel says, people think that to be just is a virtue, deserving honor and rewards, that in doing righteousness one confers a favor on society. No one expects to receive a reward for the habit of breathing. Justice is as much a necessity as breathing is, and a constant occupation. I love that. And you can probably see where I'm going with this, right? If this poem is all about the thing making the thing itself, what it is the thing does that makes it itself, we can see these beautiful examples in the first half of the poem: the kingfishers catching fire, the bell ringing, the self going itself. And then I feel like the poem really turns with that line, the just man justices, right? So it's not like you can just, think your way or read your way into being just or good, right? It's part of who you are. It uprises in that moment and you do the just thing. And I'm interested how that happens. And one of the beautiful things about this poem is I feel like it shows you that it happens in relationship to God and you realizing you're beloved of God, because the poem closes, right? I say more, the just man justices, keeps grace that keeps all his goings graces, acts in God's eye what in God's eye he is, Christ, right? So who more beloved to God than God's only son, Jesus? And we, right, get to experience that love, right? So I find that really moving to think about acting justly, ultimately flowing from receiving this astonishing and unwarranted, unmerited gift of love from God. So that is my totally, I'm not a theologian, so I'm just throwing some theology at you, but I feel like it really fits with this beautiful poem from Hopkins. I'm going to read it one more time to close out this Thursday poetry lockdown. Thanks for bearing with my theologizing. As Kingfishers Catch Fire by Gerard Manley Hopkins. As kingfishers catch fire, dragonflies draw flame, as tumbled over rim and roundy wells stones ring, like each tucked string tells, each hung bell's bow swung finds tongue to fling out broad its name. Each mortal thing does one thing and the same, deals out that being indoors each one dwells. Selves, goes itself. Myself it speaks and spells, crying, what I do is me, for that I came. I say more, the just man justices, keeps grace, that keeps all his goings graces, acts in God's eye what in God's eye he is, Christ. For Christ plays in 10,000 places, lovely in limbs and lovely in eyes not his, to the Father through the feature of men's faces. Thank you, Gerard Manley Hopkins, and thank you all for tuning in.